How can pornography impact you, your loved ones, and the world around you? Discover the answer for yourself in our free 3-part documentary series, Brain, Heart, World. In 3 30-minute episodes, this docuseries dives into how pornography impacts individuals, relationships, and society. With witty narration and colorful animation, this age-appropriate series shines a hopeful light on this heavy topic. In each episode, you'll hear from experts who share research on porn's harms, as well as true stories from people who have been impacted personally by pornography. Stream the full series for free, or purchase an affordable screening license at brainheartworld.org.
My name is Garrett Jonsson, and you're listening to Consider Before Consuming, a podcast by Fight the New Drug. And in case you're new here, Fight the New Drug is a non-religious and non-legislative organization that exists to provide individuals the opportunity to make an informed decision regarding pornography by raising awareness on its harmful effects using only science, facts, and personal accounts. We want these conversations to be educational, uplifting, and hopeful as we sit down with experts, influencers, activists, and people with personal accounts. We cover a wide variety of topics that may be triggering to some. You can refer to the episode notes for a specific trigger warning. Listener discretion is advised. Today's episode is with Alex Diaz. Alex is married to Candace, who we also sat down with in a separate conversation. Alex was exposed to pornography at an early age, and his porn consumption escalated throughout his life until he ended up in rehab. During this conversation, we discussed how porn distorted his understanding of healthy sex, how it contributed to an unhealthy cycle of stress, and how he and his wife are navigating their recovery today. With that being said, let's jump into the conversation. We hope you enjoy this episode of Consider Before Consuming. First things first, Alex, we just want to welcome you to the podcast and say thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's always a privilege to speak with people who have lived experience. It's invaluable. And so really, again, thank you for making this happen.
You're welcome.
You and Candace have 2 kids, and I currently don't hear any kids in the background. How did that happen? Like, how did you escape and get a moment free?
Yeah, she took them away. That's the only way of getting this place quiet.
For sure.
So she's out. She took them on a picnic, and I'll let her know when I'm done. Yeah, that's the only way.
Yep. As a dad, I can totally relate that you are correct when you say that is the only way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would hear stuff in the background. You'd hear crying or laughing or screaming or something.
For sure. Well, Alex, what are you up to these days? Like, what does your day-to-day look like now? Like, just to get a better idea of who you are.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm out, we live in California, Central California. And I'm in the solar industry out here. I do door-to-door sales. And so my day-to-day is the morning. I try to be there for my kids and my family in the morning time, and I'm more busy in the evening and afternoons.
Okay.
Just because that's when people are typically home.
Yeah.
And so I kind of have a flipped schedule, or a lot of people are home at 5 or 4 and stuff like that. But so I'm up in the morning. I do my stuff. I try to get up earlier than my kids, which does not always happen. And usually I'll set the alarm at 6, and they always tend to wake up right after me. But
for sure.
I try to have my like hour in the morning to do my stuff, connect and do the things I need to do, reading and stuff like that. And then, I'm pretty much just with my kids, and my wife is, she's starting her online business and stuff. So she'll take time to do that in the mornings, and then I'm out and I'm working the rest of the day. And then I'll take some time off. I have a very flexible schedule like that, but that's kind of our day to day is just
Nice.
kids and work,
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, in regards to your morning routine, I'm just wondering, like, how important are those moments of solitude? You said you try to wake up early before the kids.
Yeah. Those are so important. And I just noticed that. So if I don't take care of myself, then I'm not able to take care of my kids as well, or
Right.
other people at work, going out and providing, because you have to show up in life. You have to be present for your kids. You have to be present for your people at work. And especially in a job where I'm not getting paid unless I actually go make it happen.
Right.
And so taking time to be alone and meditate and do some good reading and things like that, journal, that's huge. Doing some workout as well. So I noticed there's just a total different energy for the rest of the day for me.
Right. Yeah. I was looking at some research yesterday, actually, and the research was talking about how important like exercise is for our mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And this particular study was like looking at like the importance of like team sports. It said that team sports were like the most effective in regards to improving mental health. And then cycling was another one. And then gym activities.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, man. Like when I exercise, I notice that like for the next 12 hours, I feel better.
Yeah. Dude, it's so true. It's a huge thing. And that's another thing I try to implement, like you said, team sport activity. I've never been into sports. Like I never played for high school or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, lately, like there's a group of guys in my work who will get together and play pickleball like
Nice.
once a week. And then there's another group of guys I'm friends with that we get together and play basketball. And so just like doing that, it's just so much fun.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
fun and you're with other people and you're exercising and you feel good. And yeah, it makes your life so much better. And I think we forget as adults to do those things
For
that we think
sure.
for kids, but we're just going to become totally more present and just better at everything we do if we take care of our bodies. It's a huge
Yeah,
part of it.
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I want to give you the opportunity to talk about something that you're proud of, like a moment to brag a little bit. Like what's something that you're proud of in your life, Alex?
Um, Well, there's a few things I guess that come to mind. One kind of just being an obvious with overcoming this addiction. This is something I'm proud of.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that I'm sure more later on, but just the fact that I'm here talking to you, like this is something that I never thought would happen. I never would foresee that because I've always been stuck in that addiction for the majority of my life. And so actually having some taking action and healing in my life is something I'm really proud of.
Yeah.
Anything in my life that I can look back and say I am proud of that is usually something that was just hard to do, like something
Yeah.
that was not easy.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, of course.
Now like pivoting to your story, your personal account, it's been years now, going way back. Did you have any preconceived notions about pornography? Like had anyone talked to you about pornography growing up?
Yeah, so I remember being a kid and hearing about it. And I remember never really coming across it until I was about, I don't remember now, maybe 11. And our family bought a home computer, and that's kind of where I first encountered it. But yeah, I do remember, it wasn't something that was talked about, I guess, that often. But yeah, I remember at least it happened a couple times because the first time I saw it, I remember thinking to myself, oh, this is what they're talking about. Like, and I actually moved away from it the first time I saw something that was kind of pornographic.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling really proud of myself. I was like, I actually did that thing that I was taught to do when I came across that. Like that just happened.
Oh, that's cool. So it sounds like with your first time experiencing pornography, you weren't actively seeking it out.
No, I guess, and I remember specifically like the image and everything.
Yeah.
And to me, I just remember thinking like that was pornography. I ended up seeking it out and finding it. So yeah, my experience, I don't think it was really like thrust upon me. It was just my family had gotten a home computer that had the internet, and I remember spending a lot of time on there doing like the paint app that was on there, whatever. Like I was an artist, I would love to draw, and I just
Right.
thought it was amazing that you could search anything online and like those images would come up.
Right.
I would just be like, I remember getting my little brothers and being like, look, you can pull up an image of a sea turtle and a sea turtle will come up. Like
For
it
sure.
was so cool to me, or anywhere in the world. I'm like, what do you want to see? Do you want to see a picture of China? And I remember like showing my little brothers, and I just thought it was the coolest thing.
It's like pure curiosity.
Yeah. It was just like fascinating where you could, anything you want to see, you can just see on this thing, and just innocence and curiosity. And I really don't remember how old I was. I wish I did. I think I was probably 11,
Yeah.
but But yeah,
For
and I don't remember specifically. I just remember seeing like an image that was a woman that was, to me, obviously was alluring, you
mm.
know?
And for context, how old are you? Just trying to figure out like
Yeah.
how old
So
the
I'm
internet
30
was.
now,
Okay,
just turned 30. So yeah, it's been 20 years.
gotcha. And at what point did you start seeking it out?
I remember, um, for whatever reason, I don't remember like the first search or anything like that, but I remember with that curiosity and fascination and also going through probably normal hormones and like,
Right.
being a preteen and stuff. I remember just seeking it out right there when no one was around, just the simplest things, but it was all just Google image. I remember when I was at that age, I didn't ever go into any porn site quite yet. That happened later on, but it was just Google image, just finding women who were, nude or whatever, and just finding it on there and really just being captivated by it. And I kept seeking it out and going there. And it was something that I never felt good about. I always knew inside that it was not something I was proud of. And I don't think it was just because I had heard before, hey, when you see this, you should avoid it. I think that was part of it. But even without that, I really felt that, again, it was something that I wasn't very proud of, but
Right.
but I continued to do because I liked the way it made me feel. At
Right.
least in
Yeah.
the moment. I never felt good after, you know.
Yeah. It's like a short-term gratification followed by a downer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's interesting because like we were talking about like pure curiosity, and it's a weird thing because sex is a natural thing and it's a normal thing, but porn is something entirely different. Porn is a product. It's all about clicks, it's about traffic. And unfortunately, because of the ease of access, like it sounds like that ease of access was problematic for you.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I don't think I would have sought it elsewhere. I wouldn't have just, at least at that age, right? I mean, maybe later on in life, but as an 11-year-old, I wouldn't have thought to go to find like a pornographic magazine or something. But
Right.
it was just, we had a computer and it was accessible, and I figured out you can search anything you want. And, one thing led to another, really.
Mhm.
And so it's just kind of a thing that kids have at their fingertips now.
Yeah. And it's problematic because, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir. You already know this, but like learning about sex through pornography also means like absorbing a lot of dangerous ideas about like sexuality and about women.
Yeah.
So it's not the best place to learn about sex, but oftentimes kids turn to it for that reason.
Yeah. I know it's too bad. I mean, we definitely need to have this. I'm glad that we have things like you guys where we can talk about it. So people need to be able to know that you can talk about it, even if you're viewing it.
Yeah, totally. Well, we know that porn can be habit forming and it can also be an escalating behavior. And when it comes to pornography consumption and it being an escalating behavior, oftentimes it will look like needing more or more often or a more specific or hardcore version of pornography to get the same level of spike in the reward pathway.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just kind of wondering, like, how did your porn consumption escalate?
Yeah. Well, like I said, started off just like that, just on Google image. And over time, it got more and more intense. And and I remember like in the 20 years or 18 years or whatever it was of this issue, kind of gone up and down. I've had good times and bad times, but overall the trajectory of it was I was doing it. I was doing it frequently, and kind of having to see more and more things to get that same arousal or that same high, so to speak. And so yeah, I remember when I getting older, middle school, high school, it turning into, I couldn't just see pictures. I had to watch videos, to get that same feeling. At that point we had like a laptop and it was easier to hide and things like that. And so that's what I ended up turning to. And then I remember as a young adult, maybe I can't remember specifically, maybe 17 or 18. But yeah, actually going into porn sites and then it kind of escalated from there. So in my more adult life, there was a period of abstinence that I was able to have. And then when I started back up again, it was same kind of process where I started with pictures and then eventually videos and I'm sure we'll get more into the story after, but like after marriage, I got married when I was 24. And it's actually a couple years into my marriage. This is just my personal story where eventually started viewing more hardcore pornography again. And I hadn't done that for a long time. But yes, definitely when I'm not doing anything to improve myself or improve my abstinence and like actually stay away from it, basically when I just, in other words, don't care, and that's just part of my habit, that's just part of my life, it does progressively get worse. I progressively will seek, hardcore things to just get the same arousal.
Right. That makes sense. It's interesting that you talked to the ease of access. You mentioned how you wouldn't go seek out a magazine, but the ease of access on the computer enabled you to do that. You also mentioned like once you got a laptop, that was another thing that made it easier to consume, like the privacy, the ease of access and the privacy.
Yeah.
That aligns with the Mayo Clinic. There's a nonprofit in Minnesota, and they list 2 risk factors for developing compulsive sexual behavior disorder. And the 2 risk factors they list are ease of access and privacy.
Totally. And just to note, yeah, I like we talked about, there was the laptop and stuff like that. And then for me, I mean, listeners now who are youth, I'm sure they have smartphones and stuff like that, but everyone had a cell phone when I was in high school. That was definitely, everyone had that. And some people had laptops. I went to college my first semester, and you kind of had to have a laptop. But at that point, I still didn't have a smartphone, and I got a smartphone. It was like, bam, like just a couple weeks after that, having that smartphone, and for the first time is when I just automatically start going back into it. Because there I was alone with just like this thing in my pocket that can just, again, view anything. And there I was back into it. So yeah, I think that plays a huge part, is just the ease and the access that we all have. And like you said, being alone.
Yeah. So it sounds like your porn consumption kind of started at an impulsive state where there was no forethought of like possible consequences. And then it kind of progressed into this unhealthy habit. At what point would you label it like a compulsive behavior or an addiction?
Well, I'd say like, it's interesting because I think throughout the whole thing, I always had kind of a habit, right? I think that I didn't realize at the time that it was like, I felt like it was always something I could just stop. I kind of felt like, I need to stop doing this and I should just stop. And then I would feel really bad at myself because I wouldn't stop. And so I'd be like, okay, let's start over. But after seeing that pattern, after a little while, I realized this is actually a problem. Like this is, it's not something that I'm just, I don't want to do that anymore. I guess I won't do it anymore and just not do it anymore. Like a normal thing. Like, I don't like the way that when I touched the pot, or the stove, it burnt my hand. So I won't do that again. But this is something that like I kept doing. And so I think for me early on, I recognized it as a bad habit or an addiction. However, I didn't ever treat it as such. I would kind of just, it's a part of my mind. Because it wasn't something that like every time I did it, I know that it was always my choice to do it. I guess I would always think that I could have the choice to just stop it anytime. And so it wasn't until like my later adult, I mean, I say later adult, I'm only 30, but like in my life to this point, the past couple years where I was like, this is an addiction, a problem that I actually need help, and was able to get out and get help that I needed.
That's cool that you were finally able to get help. It's interesting because one of the markers for addiction is hypofrontality, which is like your prefrontal cortex loses its ability to like put the brakes on the reward center. Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned that you thought you would be able to not touch the stove, but then you kept touching the stove, kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. That's one of the signs of addiction, that relationship between your prefrontal cortex and the reward pathway is hindered.
Right.
So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. looking back, I wish I would have gotten help. And I did seek out some help a few years ago, but I think so many people in this will, even if they recognize that it is an addiction, just don't treat it like it is one. Basically, they keep thinking I can just do this on my own, because in the moment, like you do, and you are the one that ends up choosing it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to stop doing it alone. Even though you started doing it alone and you choose to do it alone, you can't stop doing it alone, in my experience.
So at what point were you able to talk to someone about your struggle with pornography?
Well, taking it back to when I was 11 or 12, I did open up to my parents pretty quickly. I remember talking to my mom, just because I felt like bad and stuff. And then she talked to my dad, and then they both sat me down and kind of had a little chat with me. And I'm really grateful for my parents for doing that. And at that point I felt, oh man, yeah, I never want to do that again. But then I sure enough did. And I don't think they did have a very good follow-up. They were awesome parents and everything, but there wasn't much follow-up conversation on how is it going. And so I decided to keep it to myself, for my parents at that point. And for the several years of preteen, teenager, stuff like that, I really didn't talk to my parents about it. And then since then, I'd say, yeah, I've always been pretty open about it to people who I felt like were important to know about it, like my wife. Um, but really, yeah, I'd say for the most part, like as a teenager and as a young adult, it was kind of on my own. It wasn't until the past few years that I really have been more in consultation with others about it.
Well, thanks for sharing that. It's great insight, because I think a lot of listeners have kids that they care for, whether they're parents or not. And your personal account kind of shows the importance of having ongoing conversations. It can't just be like a one-time conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
Were you able to talk with Candace before you guys got married? Were you able to talk to her about your porn consumption?
Yeah, we did. So, and that kind of goes right into that. I remember when I was, in my early 20s and I'd be dating people, it's something I wouldn't talk about with anyone I was dating. And I had a couple girlfriends who were, just like steady girlfriends before Candace, who we didn't talk about it. I never felt comfortable enough to talk to them about that. And I never really felt like, as I was dating these different women, like inside I knew I wasn't going to marry them. And so maybe that's why it wasn't as big of a deal or something to me. But when I met Candace when I was 23, I remember really liking her and really feeling like this is someone who I actually really want to be with. And then we started dating each other pretty soon after meeting each other. And I was just like, I want to tell her everything about me. And this is a part of me that I want to talk to her about. And so, yeah, it was a few weeks into dating that the conversation opened up. And it was kind of one of those things of like, what's the worst thing you've done? Or, like what's like things you struggle with? And I remember telling her I've struggled with pornography, just to be honest with you. And it's something I'm not proud of. And I'm doing a lot better right now. And I probably thought I would never do it again, because it was, as I was dating her at first, it was something that I didn't even want to do. And, but yeah, we talked about it really early on. And then, throughout our dating, it was not that it was few and far between the times that I acted out. But when I did, I would actually talk to her about it every time that I acted out. For me, I just felt like she deserved or needed to know. And so I would just be honest with her, and it wasn't ever easy. And she was always very understanding and supportive, but also very hurt. It was something that did actually hurt her, thinking that I wanted to go view other women, and so it wasn't very fun conversation to have, but we always had it. Going into marriage, we were married a year later. And at this point, I definitely thought that I was done with it forever. It had been a little while since I had viewed it, probably, several months. And we were married. And pretty shortly after we got married, that I had acted out the first time. And I was like, I can't tell my wife now. She's my wife. What's she gonna do? I talked to a friend So that's another thing. I did have a friend who I would talk to every now and then, that we would both struggle with this um, in my adult life. And he's like, you should tell your wife. And so I did. And ever since then, it came up, in my marriage, it became a problem again. And I was always honest with her. That's something that I've always been able to do. Well, I say always, the story changes. But for the first few years of our marriage, whenever I did act out, it was something that she always knew about. I felt like she deserved to know.
It can be tough it is tough for the partner to hear these things, and to almost like, sometimes in some situations, the consumer relies on their partner like an accountability partner. And
Yeah,
that can be really, really exhausting for the partner. And it can,
because you're right. I think something that I've learned, and you need to have someone that's not just your spouse that you talk to about this. And so for me, I have a therapist, and I also have a sponsor. So somebody who has gone through their own recovery. And I know different couples do it differently. I've heard of some couples saying, like that for them, it wasn't as helpful to have him tell her every single time he acted out, that she knew the problem whenever she was aware of it. Just for me, I mean, honestly, like, I feel like if you're in a committed relationship, the other partner deserves to know that you have this struggle, you have this addiction, that you're working on it. And then you can figure out the details with him or her on how often you report or whatever. For me, what works for us is she wants to know anytime I act out. And because of that, I'm committed to telling her. There and there's like, yes, it can be exhausting and stuff like that. And the point is, like, there have been many times where I feel like the only motivation for me to not act out was I did not want to tell her, and I didn't want to experience that. The problem there, though, is that I wasn't doing it for me. And so eventually I would go act out. And then I would have to go have that conversation, or choose to have that conversation. I didn't have to, but I chose to. And so for us, like, the way that it goes for our story is, we were married, and now we've been married for almost 6 years. And so for the first 4, almost 5 years of our marriage, I would have some periods of good and some bad. And every time I acted out, I would go tell her, which she always appreciated my honesty. But it was hard, because it was like, she would go through all the emotions, and then I would go through all the emotions. And then I would pretty much feel like the only reason I don't want to do this is because I don't want it to mess up my marriage, and I don't want to have to tell her. And when I do it, I will have to tell her. And so again, there's no real healing or recovery there. So it came to a point where pretty much just, I didn't want to go through that pain anymore of talking to her about it. And we had moved to California, and we were moving because our marriage was not doing very well with the addiction, and then also just with other things, just with our marriage. And we wanted to have kind of a therapeutic move near her family, and kind of a chance to start over. And my addiction continued right away upon moving. And it was the first time in our marriage or in our relationship that I felt, I need to keep this to myself. There's no way I'm going to tell her now, because now we're making this move, and she's going to leave me because now we're near her family. And so looking back, I recognized how I created some stories in my head about how she would react. I would tell myself the story that she would for sure leave me, and it wouldn't be worth it. Therefore, I need to keep it to myself. Or it's going to be too hard for her to hear, and I'm going to protect her, so I'm going to keep it to myself. And so I did. And so I kept it to myself, and I kept acting out, and I thought that I would just do this on my own. Finally, I don't have to deal with my wife. And it was actually kind of nice. There was a few months that I was like, she thinks I'm being clean. I feel like that part of that wedge in our relationship was kind of going away. So we didn't have to deal with that anymore. And in ways, I felt like we were doing better. And I was thinking, this is good. I still need to take care of this issue, though, because it's actually getting worse. And she has no idea. And now I have this like, she thinks I'm being honest, and I'm not being honest. And, the truth is, and all that, there's a lot to learn. I think honesty to me is so valuable in a relationship that was where I went wrong. Is I don't think you should ever need to be at a place where you need to lie in your relationship. Um, but this can also become the focus of your relationship, which I think it was for ours sometimes. And when it became not the focus of our relationship, we were able to focus on other things. And so there has to be a good balance here. But this lying and continuing to act out went on for a year. And the frequency of acting out it became more frequent. And again, I started viewing more hardcore pornography. It had been a year, and she had asked me like, "Wow, you've really gone an entire year. Like, that's amazing. Is that?" And there was kind of some curiosity and some like suspicion in the way she asked it. I think she just kind of felt like that wasn't true, and she just asked me like, "Have you really gone a year?" And at that point, it was just something hit me where I just knew I could not lie to this woman. I just There's just no way I'm just gonna sit here and just say another lie. And so that's when the truth of it came out. And I just said, no, I haven't actually been perfect at this for a year, and I've struggled, and I've still been acting out. And that it really opened it all up. And so it was really difficult for us, really difficult for her. That's where a lot of her betrayal came, is where now I'm actually lying to her. And then since then, I went to rehab. And since rehab, I've been out and I've been honest with her. And now the way that I see it personally is you got to be honest in your relationship. You have to be honest. You can't create stories about the other person, what they're going to do, but you also have to be willing to accept the consequences. If my wife is going to leave me because I view pornography, then so be it. Basically, like, I want to not view pornography and overcome this for me, and not just because I'm afraid that she's going to leave me or afraid of how it's going to make her feel. And that's more at the place that I'm at right now, is I see that this is something I don't want to be with. But so for us, what works is complete honesty. And because she's expressed to me, "Hey, I want to know how you're doing." We actually have a daily check-in. So at night we report a few things. And one of those things is recovery. And I'm actually able to report to her how my recovery was that day. So during the day, I don't have to go to her. If I can go to her, but I don't have to be like, "Oh, Candace, like I saw something," or, "Hey, I am struggling." Like, I have other assets, or I have other allies that I can reach out to. But she's just told me, "Hey, I want to know where you're at every day with recovery." And there's been many times where I've just judged her for that and been like, "Man, like, other women don't need to know every day where her husband's at," or whatever. But I had to come to a point where I'm like, it doesn't matter what other people do or don't do. My wife wants to know where I'm at every day. And that's the only person that really matters. And so every day I report to her how recovery was that day. And I'll tell her if there was a slip up, then she gets to know within 24 hours. Even the days that there's a no slip up and there's just a struggle, I just say, "Hey, today I had some struggles. There was a few things that I saw outside that were triggering to me, and this is what I did with that." I actually reached out to my sponsor, or I just say, "Hey, today there was no triggers at all." And so for us, that's what works for us, just being honest. And I think that if you're not honest with your spouse, and it might look differently for different people, but I think if it comes to a point where you're actually lying or you're presenting a false truth to your spouse, then it's my belief that there can't be real intimacy and real connection there.
Right, because if you engage in deceit, then you're not giving your spouse an opportunity to accept you for you.
Right.
That makes sense. Well, it's really interesting because your personal account really shows that pornography consumption can negatively impact the relationship quality, and it can also negatively impact the relationship stability. Like, there were times where you questioned if you'd be able to maintain and continue forth with your relationship with her because of this.
Right.
I'm curious, like, what advice do you have for someone, if there's a listener who has unwanted porn consumption, but doesn't want to talk about it, that is fearful about being open and engaging in self-disclosure because of they're fearful of the possible repercussions?
Totally. My advice is to most definitely get help. Reach out to somebody who can help you. And maybe you're listening to this and you're in a place where you are very fearful about your spouse or your significant other, somebody knowing about it. And I don't want to come off like too harsh, I guess. Like I'm like, I think that at the end of the goal is to be completely honest with that person. I understand though how difficult that may feel. And so I think that no matter what you do, the number one thing is to get help from somebody. Get the help, reach out to a therapist or go to a meeting. There's meetings out there for addiction recovery, and get help, because you cannot do this on your own and you got to get some help. And then, talk to that person when and it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, don't wait until you're ready. The sooner the better. I think for me, it was good to talk to my wife right away about it. I don't recommend holding off on that. I recommend being honest, but first things first, wherever you're at, because maybe you really are too fearful or afraid or whatever, just know you cannot do this alone. And so if you don't feel comfortable reaching out to that person, reach out to somebody else who is not emotionally affected by your behavior, who can help you. That's the best advice I could give.
What about for the person that thinks that the relationship, like having a significant other, whether it's, marriage or not married, if a person thinks that relationship is going to solve their problem with their unwanted porn consumption, like what advice do you have for them based on your experience?
Yes, just know that it will not solve it. I think that in my experience, there's been a few times in my life where I felt like something in my life, a life change, would be enough motivation for me to stop, like marriage. And that for sure was the big one. And then having our children. So the first time we were going to have a child, it was like, okay, of course, I'm not going to do that after I'm a dad. And so I felt like those things would just kind of make it stop somehow. And they didn't. They did not. It doesn't matter how awesome or how big responsibility that is. It's not going to take it away. It's something that you have to do yourself. Now these things can give motivation. I went to rehab, and we had gone to therapy before. So I had therapy. We did couples counseling. I worked on, the addiction and stuff like that before. And then, like I said, we went into the whole year of me not working on it at all, not reaching out to anybody, totally working on my own and not being honest with my wife. But then I chose to go to rehab, which was the best choice I could make. And that was the life raft for me. That was now going there, I really don't think I ever would have gone there had I not been married and almost divorced, like at a point where we have kids, and like I had to come to grips with the reality. I'm like, man, I really and truly am messing things up in my life. And so that was a huge motivator. But I did choose to go for me. I had to come to a point where Candace was like, you cannot go for me, And so I chose to go regardless of what happened to my marriage. I really went in there actually thinking we might still get a divorce. And, but I was like, you know what? I don't want this problem in my life anymore. I really want to get rid of it, whether we're divorced or not. And so that for me was what made it valuable. Whereas if I just went in just for my wife, just to save us, then it would not have worked. And that's how I feel about it. If you're going to get therapy and stuff like that, that's not to say that those can't be big motivators. So for me, yeah, keeping my marriage together and us and being a good dad and everything showing up there, all those things, and seeing my children grow are humongous motivators for me, but they are not the turning point. The thing that actually makes the difference in my life is my choices, choosing to recover and getting the help that I need, because nothing else will be strong enough.
At what point did you start to discover your why? Like, was it during rehab or during the counseling sessions or another time? And when I say why, I mean like the reason why you were turning to pornography. Was there a deeper reason than just a short-term gratification thing?
Yeah, that was in rehab that I was able to discover more of that. I think beforehand, I kind of knew. I came to learn, okay, there's deeper stuff, whatever. I know that. But in rehab, yeah, I was able to identify these self-limiting beliefs that I have inside myself, and things that kind of keep me stuck. And I just learned how there are root issues going on. Pornography is not the root issue. Pornography consumption, that's like the symptom of the problem. And so sometimes you'll hear people say like, it's like a cough is a symptom of the cold you have. And so a lot of people just try to treat the symptom. But I learned that I have like I have a self-limiting belief, a fear of being a failure, for example, is one of them. And I'll notice it kind of in relation to that. A big thing for me is I'll feel like if I'm comparing my life to other people or comparing my spouse to other women, would cause a lot of hardship. But I guess my point in saying this is that I struggle not only in my marriage, but I've learned how in my life I will like compare and really have big, like, what is it? Just indecisiveness and just really be back and forth and think, oh, do I want this? Do I not want this? Did I make the wrong choice? And so when I struggle with that indecisiveness and that lack of commitment, it's so much easier for me to go view pornography when I'm in that state of indecisiveness, because there's probably a lot of reasons. I don't know all of them, but I just know that I feel like I'm in a state of worry. I'm, you know, causing stress in my body and anxiety and stuff like that. And when pornography is presented or the thought comes of, I can go do this thing, it's going to be a numbing effect. So it's going to make me feel good and give me a dopamine hit. And so I'm attracted to doing that. But also it's something that I can be certain of, that like I'm so uncertain about these other things in my life, but this is something that I know for sure will do this thing for me right in this moment. The problem with it though is that it has a net negative effect, meaning I go into that with problems. I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling like I'm comparing my wife. I'm comparing myself to other people and their success. I have all these, or whatever it is in life, stressors. And so it comes to the point where it's like, oh, you know what? This would be a great thing to do. And I do that thing. But then I'm left afterwards with the exact same list of problems I had beforehand. And then I also have the negative effects of viewing pornography. And so it's just, it's like you trade at that small moment for just even more issues. But I learned that in rehab, especially, I learned that I struggle with these comparisons and the indecisiveness. And then just in my daily life, if I'm feeling, really just down on myself, it all goes back to these core beliefs of I'm not good enough, or I can't make the right choice, the fear of commitment, fear of being a failure, all those like deep beliefs, I guess, those are the roots of it for me. And pornography ends up being a symptom. It really comes down to like not being present in your life. And I get caught up in my mind so often where I'm in this like, oh, it should be like this, it should be like that. And that's a huge thing I learned in rehab, is just being present with reality. And so pornography is so much about the unreal, right? And you go into this fantasy and you get that. And so it all has to do with that same thing, where when I'm comparing to other people, I'm not living in my own reality and I'm thinking, what if? And I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And that's another thing, is just having that mindset of should does not help. I've done this, I should be doing that. You're focusing on things that are not real because you can't do anything about them. It's like the past or it's the future. And so when I'm in that mind space, when I'm regretting the past or when I'm fearful of the future, I'm in a place where I'm much more susceptible to act out. But when I'm present and I'm like, okay, I own up to my choices and I'm here and I am grateful and all those things, then I'm feeling way more powerful. And it has less of an effect on me because I'm not trying to chase the unreal anymore.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting that we sometimes refer to it as fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the scary parts about referring to it as fantasy is like, if it's a fantasy, then the scary part is that we would step out of the reality to enter this fantasy, even though it's not real.
Right.
And that's a scary thing, because we're hardwired for connection. And again, this fantasy just isn't that. Like, you're connecting with pixels.
Right. You are. You're kind of seeking, and you're probably seeking that connection in a way, but it's not actually happening. And yeah, I mean, in true intimacy with another person, it takes being seen by both people, being accepted by both people. And it requires work also, especially in like a marriage or something like that, and if you get even deeper, if it goes in, sexual connection with somebody requires work with each other. But pornography, it's like trying to cut the corners of all the work. And it's not intimacy because you're not being seen, you're not being accepted by somebody else. You're just accepting this product and taking it in and trying to fill that void that never gets filled. And you're just not finding that connection that you need so desperately. And relationships not going to fix it. Like I talked about, at the end of the day, I had to come to love myself. I had to come to be okay with me. And then I was able to go and like, take, those care of those normal needs of relationship and connection and stuff like that. And with my wife and my kids and other healthy relationships. But yeah, I really had to come to peace with myself. And it's a work in progress. It's a work in process. I'm still in recovery, and that's the thing. Don't ever feel like you just like arrived, I guess. This is something that I'm excited to do the rest of my life, to continue recovery work. And that's the big difference. I think I would always think I was just done forever. This is never going to happen again. I did the thing I need to do. I'm over it. And there's kind of that, I guess people might feel like, oh, like I don't want to go into recovery lifestyle because then I'll have to identify myself as an addict or whatever it is. But, I just come to know, like, I am not an addict. I am a human being, but I recognize how this is something that I'm susceptible to. And so I'm going to always have some boundaries and guard and recovery work in my life, because it's just going to make me a better person anyways. And then, I'm not going to take down the guard or whatever and slip back into it later on, because that's very much a reality. It's very much a possibility.
Right. And recovery work is just another term for self-improvement. So the fact that you're all about recovery really just states that you're all about becoming the best version of yourself. So that's
absolutely,
it's a positive thing. We talked earlier about how porn consumption can often be used as like a form of sex education.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can happen whether the consumer turns to porn intentionally for education. Also, it can happen if the consumer is consuming porn and just subconsciously learns these things. And I'm wondering if you can talk to like some of the unrealistic expectations that you learned from consuming pornography, like in regards to how did it negatively impact your expectations of what sex is?
Yeah, sure. You see a lot of in those videos, it's just like we talked about, fantasy. And the truth is none of it's real. You even think that the person in there is wanting to do that, or if that person is choosing to do that. First of all, you have no idea, I've learned, if that is the case. But even if it was, if it's someone who's they just want to be a porn star and that's just what they aspire to and that's what they're doing and whatever, it's still not real. You're seeing these videos and it's not like that situation. It's all filmed. It's just like watching a movie, and you're watching a movie and you think like, oh, like this marriage, like these people, I want a marriage like that or whatever. And you see them, it seems so real because they're such good actors or whatever it is. And it's still not real, right? It can represent something like some true art, like in a film might represent truth, but what you're actually seeing is not real. It's actually acting. It's all, there's cameras and there's lines. Yeah, it's a product. And so it's an end product and it's a great illusion, right? You could see like the greatest actors, like whatever, and think, they have such a good marriage in that whatever. And it's not real. So in pornography, you confuse the real with the unreal. It's not real intimacy. It's not real sex. And so for me, there was some, I'd say like, just like it being easy to just get hard and please this woman. And it's all just perfect. And my brain was trained in a way that's how sex was. And so honestly, through our marriage, we've had struggles. It's gotten better now that I'm actually in recovery, so much better. But struggles with, my brain was completely trained to get off at an image, and not just one image, but when I would view pornography, it was one after another, especially as videos is one after another. So I've seen these thousands of images that are in my mind, and my brain is trained to that and to do it to myself. And so when having sex with my wife, it was now I have this one woman who's here. Like, it's not like a video, it's all cut together perfectly where everything happens perfectly. It was like I couldn't get like hard or there for her unless I was thinking of something pornographic. and then it wouldn't work. I would not be able to please her as much as I wanted to. And that was frustrating. And then, now it's like, oh, it didn't work out. It created a lot of disconnection and problems in our intimacy just because I was addicted to pornography. And so now, when I went to rehab, it was 3 months. And so coming out of that, going back into intimacy and stuff, it's been progressively better and better, where sometimes I will start, we'll be having sex. And if I'm having a hard time in my mind, we have an agreement where I can just stop us from continuing because I'm struggling with that. But the reality is, it still has an effect on me, where I've had years and years of training my brain to relate that to sex. And so if you think that it's not causing you any sexual issues or future relationship issues, it really is.
Yeah, it's interesting because when it comes to consuming pornography, the user is in total control of the sexual experience. And in contrast, just like what you're talking to, like with healthy sex with a partner, that's not the case. You're sharing control with the partner. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, pornography, you're just a consumer, and you just consume, and you go, I'm bored of this video, on to the next one, right? Boom, 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 boom. And you go, it's just it's a selfish act. It's all about yourself. And so, when you're in that with someone else, you're not in complete control. You both are, and you nailed it, man. And it's just one person. So when Candace and I have real intimacy and sex together, it is so much better than any kind of pornography experience I've had. It's just because it's real connection. That's what sex is for. And so you're going to have more satisfaction with something real than something fake.
Right. Yeah. Again, as human beings, we are hardwired for connection. And yeah, it's interesting that you experienced like this type of sexual dysfunction from your porn consumption.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that you had this false expectation. I think you said this, maybe I misheard you, but so correct me if I'm wrong. But I think you said that it's like you were consuming porn and the expectation was, you just get hard and then you are able to satisfy this woman.
Right.
And did you say that or did I mishear you?
Yeah, I said that.
So I just think that's interesting because like even the performers, from what I know, speaking to performers or former performers, is that oftentimes they're using drugs to get hard. So it's like there's this false expectation that the consumer's like, oh, this must be what it's like.
Totally. You get caught up and you think, oh, that's what it's like, and that's reality, and it's not. So I can't stress that enough.
If I'm putting myself in your shoes, Alex, and as you address this challenge and then you go to attend, you go to rehab, I'm just wondering if you were experiencing shame at any point during this process.
Yes, definitely. Shame has a part to play in this. That is just as destructive to me mentally as viewing pornography, maybe in a different way, but it is destructive. And I left rehab. Full disclosure, I left rehab. I had been 3 months clean because I was acting out even before going into rehab after telling Candace, and 3 months clean. And then I went 6 months after rehab. So almost 9 months. And I acted out. I was not taking my recovery day to day as I could have. And I was getting imbalance in my life. And I was like, my life shattered is how it felt. And so looking back on it, and that, that was a few months ago. And between that, I've had a couple times I've acted out. And I look at it now. And so I keep track of my day to day. Today I am on day 48 of sobriety. However, the whole year, because it's been a year since I went into rehab now, almost exactly, just barely over a year since I went into it, I have made a lot of progress. And there's a point where I expect perfection and think I'll never do that again. Now, I'm not saying that you should do it again. And maybe I never do it again, right? But I learned that after like acting out again, after having like being clean for a while and all that, I really dove into this depression of like beating myself up and just really, and there's a place for those emotions. There's a place for feeling sad and feeling bad. It's not like I'm gonna be like, oh, whatever. But I took it to another level and gave into that, immediate like beat yourself up over it. And that's just not helpful. I've learned and I have relearned how if you act out, okay, own up to it, be honest about it, get the help that you need, but move the freak on. Like you're not gonna make yourself feel any better by beating yourself up. So yeah, shame has played a huge, huge part in this addiction. And now, as I said, in my most recent relapse, I had some shame. I will not deny, I had some shame afterwards, but it was a couple days after that I remember I was just on my own, and I had this thought of just like, you can actually be healed of this. You don't actually have to keep doing it. And if you do, you're not a bad person. It's hard to put into words, but just let go and open yourself up to the new possibilities. And so now I'm just feeling a lot healthier, and I'm doing the things I need to every single day. Like I said, it doesn't mean that I can be like, oh, I'm going to act out anytime now. Like, no, I actually think my personal thought is if you can go a week, you can go 3 weeks. If you can go a month, you can go 9 months. Basically, you don't have to go back. You always have a choice, and I don't have to go back to it. But I have to remind myself that if that were to happen, then I don't have to stay stuck. I don't have to stay down. It's kind of like if you're riding, this is an analogy someone gave me in rehab. If you're riding an escalator that's going down and you're walking up the down escalator, you're trying to get to the top of the escalator going down, which is always a fun thing to do as a kid, right?
Yeah.
Super dangerous. But let's say you're climbing up that thing and then you fall. Well, you can stay down and then eventually you're going to hit rock bottom again. But if you fall and you get back up and you keep going, then okay, maybe you got hurt, whatever, but you keep going. And so, yes, I'm honest with you and with others that I have acted out on it even since rehab. But I have an upward trajectory and I have not gone back to ground zero, because afterwards I've been able to pick myself up and do what are the things I'm missing in my life. I was not going to my meetings regularly a couple months ago. I was not reaching out to my sponsor regularly. And so naturally life happens. And that's the thing that I tend to do. I have to learn that about myself. And so now I'm like, hey, let's do my dailies. Let's do my meetings. Like, let's do all the things to keep me in balance and keep this upward trajectory. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's, I guess, what I'd have to say about shame is it's just nothing good comes from that.
Yeah. Thanks for speaking to that. I love your personal account because it shows that setbacks don't necessarily mean failure.
Right.
I love your analogy with the escalator, and I can totally relate to that as a kid. And having kids, my kids always want to run up the opposite side, up the up the wrong escalator. So
right. Yeah, totally.
That visual really helped.
Like you said, though, failure, it's get up and move on. It's not the end. People who are listening who are like, like I failed again, like don't give into that. Just keep going, keep climbing, and live in consultation. That's like I said earlier, you said, what's the advice? The advice is to have somebody you can talk to about that after you act out, and especially before. That way you're not battling it alone.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I personally really like your perspective on, like, if you're going to consume porn again. You mentioned how it's possible that you do turn back to pornography. It's also possible that you don't turn back to pornography. And I think that can be a very healthy perspective, because I think sometimes it's a common pitfall for people to say, like, have this false enthusiasm, like, never again. Yeah, I will not do it ever again. I'm over it. And I think that false enthusiasm can be detrimental. And it seems like your approach is more of like this realistic approach. Like, you realize that you're still a human being.
Right. Exactly. You don't have to turn to it. now I have things that I will do immediately. What I do is I reach out. And I know a lot of people, there's a lot of things I can do. And maybe you think I need to go, maybe on my list of things to do is I go for a walk or whatever it is. My advice is when you're triggered, reach out to somebody. like I said, I really, this is the main thing I want people to get out of this is that you don't do this alone. I have a sponsor because connection is the opposite of addiction, like they say.
That's really cool. What are some of the benefits you've experienced from being porn free?
Well, I've been just literally physically able to have sex way better. And so again, like there's progress and there's times that I struggle mentally and stuff like that. But so intimacy has improved with my wife. Just knowing that, because I began lying about it. And I think a lot of people in this addiction are living a double life. And just knowing that I don't have to have that double life and keep up that, that facade is really freeing, because I was living a double life and it was exhausting. And at times I would believe my own lies. And at times I would gaslight my wife when she would suspect something was wrong. And I'd be like, nothing's wrong. Nothing's going on. Like you're the one who's crazy, for thinking that. So just not having to deal with all that crap anymore. I have a lot more energy to focus on more positive things. It feels great to be able to not fear my wife or my kids, grabbing my iPad and going on it for anything or using it or my phone. Like there is no fear because I know they're not going to find anything. And so, yeah, I'm able to just also like, it's weird. I think about this addiction. And I think a lot of times in my life, I felt like it was like my thing I would do. Like I felt like it was my hobby, like I would be always caught up with, work or school or marriage or family. And I didn't really ever take that much time for myself to consistently exercise or do things that even though I was a theater major and I love acting, that was like my passion. I'd be doing a play. It came to a point where because that was kind of like work, And so even if you're doing what you love, I was never taking time for myself, really. Like I wasn't taking time to go hang out with friends as an adult. I just let go of friends. And so now I'm like, the time I guess that I would have been like acting out, like I'm being more aware of, I go play sports with people like once a week. I make sure to take care of my basic needs. I love being in nature. So I fit that into my schedule to go outside, to have time with my family in the mountains. And so just kind of feeling my life where now there's like literally there's more time in my life, right? Filling that with something positive. And so now that's not like, that's not my thing anymore. That's not just the thing I do by myself. I have other things that are interesting. So I feel like my life has freed up. My time has freed up. My production work has gone up a lot because in my work, and I think a lot of people struggle with not being able to be as productive at work, especially if you're finding an opportunity to act out at work. And for me, like I said, I'm a door-to-door salesman. Totally, no one's there breathing down my neck. I don't have to work if I don't want to work. And so it's very, very easy to sneak off and find places to act out. And then when I did, I would feel crappy and I was not able to sell as well and wasting time. And so just the simple reality of I have more time to work, I'm more present in my work, and I'm making more money now than I was when I was an addict. And so I guess overall life has just improved.
That's a beautiful thing. That's really cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, of course.
It's been a great conversation. Like it's been really cathartic for me, and I know it's going to help a lot of listeners as well. But we want to leave you with the opportunity to have the last word as this conversation is coming to an end. Are there any last thoughts that you would like to share? Because we'd like to hear those.
Yes, I will just say to you who's listening, focus on the good in life, in yourself, in your loved one who is struggling in this. Because it can be very easy to just focus on the bad. It's so easy to just focus on the bad in life. And especially in this addiction, it's easy to make that be the focal point of your life. I am still in the beginning stages of my recovery, but I can honestly say to you guys, this is just as much to you who's listening as it is to me to remember that I can be free of this. And I can overcome this. Just get the help. Don't have to do it alone. Absolutely don't have to do it alone. But yeah, just don't give up hope. Do not give up on yourself. Smile, tell yourself you love yourself, and just keep that energy and that mentality. Even if you do have a bad day, or it's okay to have bad days, just focus on that which is good without neglecting the bad. I don't want to say, just don't worry about the bad, sweep it under the rug. Take care of yourself, take care of this problem, get the help you need, but make sure that your focus and your attention, your energy is on that which is good.
I love that. And the reality is like you've put in a lot of work, and Candace has put in a lot of work to make this relationship work and to continue to grow together. And there's also a lot of cases out there where that's not the case, where it did disrupt the stability of the relationship to the point where the relationship ended.
Right.
And I just want to state that I admire, again, I already stated this, but I'll state it again. I admire you and I admire Candace. And for me, it comes back to the fact that moments of bliss are not free. Like, you guys are paying the price for moments of bliss. And we appreciate you joining us today on the podcast and for being vulnerable and strong and sharing with us your personal account. I think it's going to help a lot of people. So
I hope so, man. That's great to hear. Yeah, I hope so too. That'd be awesome to help others through this. This is a great platform you guys have. So thanks for all the work you guys are doing. And, let us know if there's anything else we can do. We're here. We're excited to join the fight.
Want to bring Fight the New Drug to your school, business, or community event? Lucky for you, we're pros when it comes to live presentations. We provide information and entertainment to inspire your audience to consider how pornography can impact themselves, their loved ones, and the world around them. We'll present the facts in an interactive, age-appropriate, and engaging way so your audience can walk away with more information on the harms of porn. To book a presentation, visit ftnd.org/live. That's ftnd.org/LIVE.
thanks for joining us on this episode of Consider Before Consuming. Consider Before Consuming is brought to you by Fight the New Drug. Fight the New Drug is a non-religious and non-legislative organization that exists to provide individuals the opportunity to make an informed decision regarding pornography by raising awareness on its harmful effects using only science, facts, and personal accounts. If you want to learn more about today's guest and the conversation we had, you can check out the links included with this episode. Again, big thanks to you for listening to this conversation. As you go about your day, we invite you to increase your self-awareness, look both ways, check your blind spots, and consider before consuming.